Shalom, more praise to Yahweh Shemel Shah Double Line C Apostles GMS. This is Amnawa Allah coming at you in another video. And in this video, I want to focus on the book of Romans, chapter 12, verse 3. Okay? And basically just going to the topic of thinking soberly and not thinking of yourself hiding you ought to think. And when you get deeper into the scripture, it gives you a deeper meaning of something, a deeper meaning of why. So let's get right to it, of why you should do that. Romans chapter 12, verse 3. For I say, through the grace given unto me, the mercy given unto him, by Yahweh Shemashah, of course, to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think. So you don't want to think of yourself more highly than you ought to think. So don't think of yourself greater than you should. You should look at yourself lowly, be humble. Because the gifts that we've been given, we did not get it ourselves. It was given unto us. Here's the reason why you shouldn't think of yourself above what you ought to think. Proverbs 16, verse 18. Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. So pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit goes before your fall. In other words, that pride, which is to be haughty, same thing, it goes right before destruction. It goes right before your fall. In other words, that's what leads to it. Because when a person has a prideful, haughty spirit, they think themselves greater than what they really are, overestimating their own abilities. And overestimating their abilities can ultimately lead to their downfall. Sometimes if a person thinks they're smarter than what they really are, they may say something that's not wise and then be shown that be exposed that they're really a fool. Just using that as an example, you might think you're the best basketball player in the park and you challenge the wrong guy and he beat you 11-1, 11 zip. You understand? Your fall has been shown before you, has been proven. But in this aspect, the spiritual aspect, a person that's prideful, that's haughty, that's doesn't show looking at themselves in a moderate manner, in a lowly, humble manner, ultimately that could lead to their destruction because they don't put the Most High first. They're wise in their own eyes. And when you don't put the Most High first, that could lead to your downfall. Because you think that you're great on your own. And disregard the Most High could, lead to a judgment from the Most High. Like the situation with Moses when he struck the rocks so water can come out. And he said, must I get you this water? I'm not quoting verbatim. He didn't put the Most High first. It was actually the Most High that was doing it through Moses. Moses was doing it through the power of the Most High, Or same difference, you know what I mean. For I say through the grace given unto me, back in Romans 12 and 3, for I say through the grace given unto me, to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly. Let's go to that word, soberly.
Strong's G 4993. Sophroneo.
Sophroneo. To be of sound mind, to be in one's right mind, to exercise self-control, to put a moderate estimate upon oneself, think of oneself soberly, to curb one's passions. So to think of yourself soberly is to put a moderate estimate upon oneself. Look at the word moderate. See? Moderate means to be within limits, avoiding extremes. As an adjective, it can describe something average, calm, or reasonable, like moderate weather or moderate skills. As a verb, it means to make something less extreme, such as moderating your speed or moderating your demands. As a noun, a moderate is a person who moderates views, especially in politics. So moderate ultimately means to be within your limits, to be less extreme, to avoid extreme. So you want to you want to have a moderate estimate or moderate measurement of your own self. Think beyond your limits. Do not think beyond your limits. In other words, take into account that you are a mortal man, a mortal human being that's capable of dying. You're not a god. What was given unto you was given to you by the Most High. We're mortal beings. We are fallible, meaning we are capable of fault. We aren't perfect. We may know things, but there's always room to learn more things. So we aren't omniscient, meaning all-knowing. So put a moderate estimate upon yourself, and think of yourself soberly, in a moderate manner. Okay? Quick scripture, 1 Corinthians 4:6. And these things, brethren, I have in the figure transferred to myself and to Apollos for your sakes, that ye might learn in us not to think of men above that which is written, that no one of you be puffed up for one against another. So the main point, that's a good verse. Somebody do listen to that verse. But the main point I want to get to is that you might learn in us not to think of men above that which is written. So the Apostle Paul and Apollos, they were just messengers of the word of the Most High, Yahweh Bashim Yashah. They're just messengers of the word. They weren't for anyone to go and brag and boast and say, I learned from the Apostle Paul, I learned from Apollos. It wasn't meant for y'all to brag about that as if, they're the ones who acquired this knowledge on their own. No, don't think of us above that which is written. We didn't get this knowledge on our own. This is given us by the Most High. You can read more about this going and read stuff in the first chapter of this book. First chapter, 1 Corinthians. You can learn more about it. But it says, not to think of men above that which is written, that no one of you be puffed up for one against another. Because people who learn from Apollos and people who learn from Paul, that can cause them to get puffed up, filled with pride and haughtiness. Why? Because they worship. That's like you're praising the creature. It's like you're worshiping the creature more than the creator. They are creatures, they are creatures, meaning they are a creation of the Most High. So don't think of us above that which is written. Don't look at us like we're somebody to brag about. Yeah, I learned under this person. I learned the Apostle Paul. I learned on the Apollos. Don't look at us like that and brag and boast about it. No, we're just ministers. I could read more into that, but that's the point. It goes into more into it in verse 7, but I'll read briefly. For who maketh thee to differ from another? What makes you different from anyone else? And what hast thou that thou hast not received? What do you have that you didn't receive? Meaning, everything you have, you received it. It's a rhetorical question. What do you have that you didn't receive? Nothing. It's like your parent tells you, let's say you're 9 years old and your parent tells you, what do you have that I didn't buy you? There's nothing you could say. Everything you got, you was bought by your parents. So when he's saying, what hast thou that thou didst not receive? Nothing. Everything you got, you received. It was given to you by the Most High. Now, if thou didst receive it, which you did, why doest thou glory as if thou hadst not received it? So don't glory as if you haven't received something. Think of yourself low. Don't glory as if you haven't received something that you got on your own. Now, this is the point I want to get to. So I'll continue on. But to think soberly, Romans 12:3. But to think soberly, according as the Most High have dealt to every man the measure of faith. Now let's look right at that real fast. Think soberly. We broke that down already. According as the Most High have dealt to every man the measure of faith. So we got to think of ourselves soberly or moderately in accordance to how the Most High has dealt to every man the measure of faith. So the Most High has given us all a certain measure of faith. He has given us all certain types of gifts, right? Now, first of all, if you know the scripture, it's giving you a contrast between thinking yourself highly and thinking yourself soberly. So it says, to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly. So it's telling you it's comparing thinking yourself highly to think yourself soberly. So if thinking yourself highly is putting yourself on a pedestal, for example, then obviously thinking of yourself soberly is humbling yourself. So it's giving you the dichotomy between highly and soberly, the difference. So that right there shows you soberly is the opposite of highly. So the scripture is giving you a clear picture of what it means right there by using the word that means the opposite. But to think soberly according as the Most High have dealt to every man the measure of faith. So we ought to think of ourselves soberly or humbly, lowly, moderately, according to how the Most High has dealt to every man the measure of faith. So we all have certain measures of faith. We all have certain gifts that the Most High has given us. But being the body of Yahweh Shah, we all have different types of gifts. And being that we all have different types of gifts, all have different measures of faith, we all have different offices, then to create something called, look at this word right here. It's a word called interdependence. Interdependence. The dependence of two or more people or things on each other. So the Most High have given every man a measure of faith, right? But that shows that the body, that there is an interdependence of two or more people or things on each other. In other words, there's various different measures of faith. And in order for that body to properly function, we are interdependent, meaning we have a dependence on each other. You have a dependence on this brother that has that measure of faith, this brother that has that measure of faith. We are all a body. So we are not independent, but we have interdependence, meaning we are all dependent upon one another in order for the body to function. Therefore, why think of yourself highly? So it's showing you he's don't think of yourself highly. Okay, so we got the definition. So we gotta think soberly, according as the Most High have dealt to every man the measure of faith. So you're supposed to think in accordance to the measure of faith that we was given for our certain gifts. So that's what we're supposed to think upon. The measure of faith that we was given. And that measure of faith that we was given is going to the spiritual gifts that we was given. Okay? So, but to think soberly, according as the Most High have dealt to every man the measure of faith. So we're supposed to think based upon that measure of faith that we were given. And based upon that measure of faith or that gift that we was given, how can we use that to further the ministry and to benefit the body? That's how we're supposed to think. Measuring that according to that faith of that gift that we were given. Now then it said, remember it said the measure of faith, right? Ephesians 2:8. For by grace are you saved through faith, and not that of your own selves. It is the gift of the Most High. So think soberly according to the measure of faith that the Most High, to every man, that the Most High is given. The measure of faith. Okay, think soberly according to the measure of faith that the Most High has given every man. But right here it says, faith is a gift from the Most High, which shows you once again why you shouldn't think of yourself highly that you ought to think, but rather think of yourself soberly according to the measure of faith that the Most High has given you. According to every man, the Most High has given a measure of faith. Because faith is what? A gift. So being that it's a gift, you'll think soberly or humbly or lowly, and not higher than you ought to think. See how Romans 12:3 said that? See how it says, to every man that is among you not to think of himself more higher than you ought to think, but to think soberly, according as the Most High has dealt to every man the measure of faith. But faith is what? By grace are you saved through faith. It is a gift from the Most High. So it's a gift from the Most High. So being that faith is a gift, we've received it from the Most High. Guess what? Why think of yourself higher than you ought to think? Why not think yourself soberly? Think according to the measure of faith that was given unto you. Because faith is something that was given unto you. It's a gift. And because that gift was given unto you, don't think of yourself highly, but rather think of yourself soberly. See that? Verse 9, Ephesians 2:9. Not of works, lest any man should boast. If it was about works, men will boast. But it's not about works. The works of the law. Because your person will boast in that. I'll keep this law, I'll keep that law. But it's about faith. So you won't boast or think of yourself highly than you ought to think. Rather, you would think soberly, humbly, lowly. Acknowledging that the gifts was given unto you by Yahweh Shem Yahushua. Romans 3:27. I'm going to go right to the point. Where is boasting then? It is excluded. By what law of works? Nay, but by the law of faith. So once again, boasting is excluded because of faith. So being that boasting is excluded because of faith, back in Romans 12:3, not to think of himself, for I say through the grace given unto me, to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly according as the Most High hath dealt to every man the measure of faith. Why? Because by grace are you saved through faith. It is a gift of the Most High. Being that it's a gift, you'll think soberly and not higher than you ought to think because it was given unto you. Being that it's a gift that was given unto you and you didn't get it yourself, guess what? Where is boasting? There is no boasting. Why? because it's not about the works of the law, but it's about faith. So ultimately, that's what the Apostle Paul is telling you. Think soberly, because everything that was given unto you, you was given a gift of faith. Okay? So don't think yourself highly, think yourself soberly. So with that, I'm going to close. I'm saying, oh, praise you. How about Shemir Shah? Double on C Apostle GMS. This is Amna Allah coming at you. This is Amna Allah who better learn something. Shalom, will praise you. How about Shemir Shah? Double on C Apostle GMS. I hope better learn something. Shalom. I started like I'm about to do another intro again. But yeah, I hope better learn something. There's another scripture I wanted to get in Hebrew, but that's good. Shalom.